Jackson County. Means we're close to Jackson City, right?
Should be more than a few miles.
You ready to see dear old brother?
I'm just ready to get there.
You nervous?
I don't know what I'm feeling.
Writing the script for this video has been a long and intellectually stimulating process. The first draft was written over a year ago. Then life happened and the project was shelved. Subsequent journeys through vastly different game experiences and the discussions surrounding them started nagging at my critical instincts towards this game, this thing, this obsession that represents everything I hate and love about modern video games. Why haven't I played The Last of Us?
So is that everything you hoped for?
Jury's still out. But man, you can't deny that view.
Come on, this way.
The Last of Us is one of those games that begs to be examined, a low-hanging fruit of AAA gaming. Massively marketed and excessively praised, it has gained traction among gaming's elite thinkers and the general public. It is now widely thought of as a masterpiece, one of the defining titles of its era.
Ellie!
Does it live up to those lofty expectations? Let's find out. The Last of Us is a third-person cinematic action-adventure game. Cinematic is the key word there. The gameplay, cutscenes, acting, and music all come together into a unified whole, which evokes the film landscape that the game itself aspires to. This is nothing new, of course. Games like Max Payne 3, Tomb Raider, and the Resident Evil series have betrayed the game industry's debt to its cinematic counterpart. But The Last of Us may be the first time that the cutscenes in a game have proven the equal to film and television. That may be one of the reasons why everyone gushed over this game upon release, and you know what? They have a point. Other games like the previously mentioned Max Payne and Tomb Raider had attempted to scale that mountain, but nagging issues prevented them from reaching the desired level. Whether it was the graphical fidelity not being high enough to overcome the uncanny valley, or frankly bizarre decisions by the game directors, something always got in the way. Now, in addition to some truly top-notch performances from the lead actors and industry-leading sound design, we finally have a game that, production-wise, doesn't wilt under the dramatic microscopes like so many before it. I mean it when I say that The Last of Us has some of the most beautifully moving scripted scenes in video game history. So how does the rest of the game come across? In earlier drafts of the script, I expressed annoyance and frustration about the core gameplay, its contradictions, contrivances, and collisions with its own narrative functions. I could comprehend no other approach but anger when covering this game, which immediately put me at odds with the gaming community at large. A year can change things, if not opinions, but angles of discussion. I shall attack The Last of Us at its core, the very fiber of its being. One of the defining theories of film is mise-en-scene. It espouses that everything within a scene has a place in defining and symbolizing the narrative. From the setting and lighting to details like the choice of film stock or placement of props, it is a theory that emphasizes the unity of film as a cohesive narrative whole. Since The Last of Us aspires to be compared to great films, why not apply this theory to the game as a whole and see what we come up with? Before I dive into attacking the game though, let me start by listing some of the things that it does right. Number 1. There is a solid core of action gameplay here, with smooth movement controls and an intuitive, almost fully organic HUD design. The smoothness of controlling Joel and Ellie as they slowly make their way past a group of bandits or infected helps alleviate some of the frustrations otherwise encountered. Number 2. The game world is gorgeously rendered, with stunning lighting effects and enough small details to make this a believable post-apocalyptic world. From the starkness of the many abandoned homes you scavenge, to the crumbling urban sprawls. From the fungus overtaking the infected, to the high-quality animations, there's so much graphical beauty to take in here that it almost overtakes any possible criticisms. Number 3. The soundscapes that surround you as you make your way through the game are on another level as well, with Gustavo Santaolalla's guitar-based score weaving its way through the headspace, while the subtle snarls of the infected and the rasp of Joel's clothing keep you alert. No game even came close to matching the aural achievements on display in 2013. Now, we can attack it. The Last of Us is a game of exhausting contradictions and overly predictable cliches. This is a game that attempts thematic unity, but stumbles out of the gate immediately by leaving one huge question up in the air. What exactly is the purpose of the infected? Symbolically, thematically. If they did fulfill basic thematic criteria, how does said criteria slot them into the gameplay itself? I've heard people say to me that the infected are supposed to represent constant danger, or variations on the theme of paranoia. True, the characters are all paranoid that the infected will attack at any time, and they do serve to drive the plot forward by virtue of Ellie being the supposed cure for it, but paranoia about the infected does not mean that they themselves represent paranoia. Going back to early zombie films like George Romero's Night of the Living Dead, and even some sci-fi flicks like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the living dead represented something. By using subtle lines of dialogue and tricks of cinematography and staging, the films presented a fear of communism that was palpable and persistent throughout their entirety. Going through The Last of Us, I can't help but notice that the infected are only presented as an obstacle to be overcome in gameplay. Sure, there is panic among the population at the very mention of infected, but nothing otherwise pops out as indicative of their thematic purpose as an agent of fear. In fact, as one goes through the game, one could easily suggest that the role of the infected could just as easily have been filled by just regular human opponents. The destruction of the world could very easily have been accomplished by nuclear weaponry, with hordes of rampaging bandits and mercenaries wreaking just as much havoc as the infected could have. And in the sequences where you do encounter human opponents, they seem to have just as much destructive potential as the supposed main threat anyways. Imagine the sewer sequence, but with human enemies as the cause of death and destruction witnessed there. The pathos would have been overwhelming and relevant thematically, not to mention possibly striking a chord within our own chaotic global climate. The infected don't even turn out to be the main moral threat in the end. The human resistance is. They present the final gameplay and story challenges for the player and Joel to overcome, brushing aside the infected as merely the catalyst for the plot and actions of the characters. Joel and Ellie could easily have just been delivering an important package or a cure for radiation sickness for all the good the infected are to the plot. This failure to establish the supposed main enemy of the game as its main thematic threat spreads to the gameplay itself, where the infected resort to cheap tricks to mask their naked emptiness. The AI in this game is not especially bright, what with the human enemies and allies constantly acting like dogs with their tails on fire. They'll run into and out of cover, charge straight at a shotgun-wielding Joel, or stand in place for ages waiting to be shot. As a result, the infected, having barely any weapons to speak of, must resort to charging and overwhelming you with numbers instead of providing any actual gameplay challenge through tactics or intelligence. Instead, to overcome the AI deficiencies, the game simply gives a lot of the infected unblockable insta-kill attacks if they get too close. Thanks, Naughty Dog. One could argue that such cheap tactics present credible gameplay challenges, but let's not kid ourselves. With just a few AI polishes, the game's human enemies could have been monstrously powerful foes, enough to probably even match Halo's legendary AI. Then the game could have been filled with actual challenges instead of controller-smashing insta-kills. As such, fighting the infected becomes such an interminable slog that I flat out gave up on the game after learning that the story would be extended after the university, and that I would have to fight more of these things eventually. No matter how good the rest of the game's story was, and believe me, I found a lot to love, it couldn't stand up under the colossal weight of the infected grind. That's a major problem when an enemy in a game makes you want to never pick it up again. Alas, I resumed playing after a month-long break and found the game getting progressively unbalanced by one-hit kill revolvers and my growing awareness of the AI quirks. I cruised through the last half of the game, but it was a joyless cruise, made infinitely more joyless whenever more infected appeared. It's also where the human opponents finally started throwing their weight around in the story, to the game's detriment, unfortunately. See, the problem with presenting as vast a threat as the infected means that arguably the focus should have remained on them. Instead, Joel and Ellie are thrust into several situations where the humans that remain are the main catalyst for the relationship growth between the two. Since that relationship is key to the game's dramatic flow, the infected become even bigger afterthoughts, as they only exist to bring them together and nothing more. They aren't developed sufficiently to be interesting, nor do they justify their presence beyond simply adding gameplay challenge. They are deadweights on the main attraction, halting the flow whenever they appear. Are you starting to see my point? Now that we've tackled the single largest narrative point of contention, let's start nitpicking the gameplay. Having already established the existence of the infected as utterly useless and frustrating elements added to the game, we can safely bypass them in the rest of the discussion. How about them ladder/plank sections? Yeah, they're useless symbolically and thematically as well. The worst kind of padding really, masquerading as gameplay depth. Since they take up around, 20% of gameplay time, it would be foolish not to mention them. I find it really weird how the game eventually balances out. In the course of the gameplay, Joel will eventually upgrade his weapons into uber powerful game changers, completely sucking the challenge out of the game after the halfway mark, since, again, the AI isn't getting any better. Joel eventually becomes capable of wiping the floor with the armored human opponents that the game puts in your way, since the regular human opponents eventually don't cut it, and can even start laughing in the face of the infected once his shotgun becomes fully leveled. This eventual downgrading of the threats in the game also serves to undermine the dramatic tension in the plot. Even Ellie starts off able to mow down heaps of enemies, only becoming threatened whenever I seriously screw up, or when going up against, you guessed it, an insta-kill boss. I'm not even mentioning the various AI screw-ups that completely break the game's immersion levels, nor the obvious scripted triggers that I anticipated with loud moans of disappointment.
Damn it.
There is enough going on though that the game can still have truly rewarding stealth and action segments. One memorable section escaping from pursuing security forces and another scripted sequence in a hospital stand out memorably. The solid design of the controls and HUD elements, the combination of the excellent sound design and stealth mechanics, and the meaty feel of the guns and melee combat all make this, objectively, a good game. Sections where you simply explore the ruins of America, with nothing but the ambiances of nature and the company of Ellie to break the silence, can be utterly engrossing in their own right. The sheer graphical beauty and overall art design on display, especially when you consider the limitations of the PS3, simply defy expectations. However, this supposed greatest game of the era simply doesn't stand up to any scrutiny that would justify that lofty title. It wants to be about something, but can't quite define what that something is. Moral complexity, the inherent animal instincts of humanity, the love that can grow between two people in desperate situations. Every time the game throws an issue into the air, it gets blown away by the heavy winds of contradictions that are the infected. I wanted to love this game, desperately so, but I couldn't ignore the dramatic holes, the constant frustrations and slogs. In the end, I can only call this a good game, for it is nowhere near the greatness it aspires to. Who knows, maybe in time others will see it my way. In any case, after I finished the game, I had had enough of it, and I traded it in for Beyond Two Souls. Speaking of,
I see things at night. Terrifying things. I tell myself it's only nightmares, but I know it's not true. Once Pandora's box is open, it can never be closed again. No, it's not nightmares. It's what is about to happen. I've died twice already. I'm not afraid of death anymore.